Thank you. Welcome to the Town of Orange, Connecticut Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission. Tonight is Tuesday, October 23rd, 2007. We are on the lower level of the Town Hall, 617 Orange Center Road. It's 7:31, I'll call it p.m. On tonight's agenda, we have a special guest. The first item is our town clerk, but before we get to that, I'd like to introduce everyone on the commission. I am Charles Waskowitz, and to my left,
Mike Robershaw,
Bill Perfetto,
Drew Gunning,
Jim Ewan,
Diana Ross.
and our staff on the Inland Wetlands Commission's Katie Kyle and R. Scott Allen. Tonight, the first item is town clerk, the voting machine presentation. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you. I want to just pass those out.
As most town residents know, there is a new voting machine that we must use in this coming November election, and Patrick's going to show us how it works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to tell you that I've been going to the various boards and commission meetings and just making presentations to talk about the new voting machines that are going to take place November 6th, just 2 weeks from today. What we're doing is we're complying with new federal law that is called HAVA, Help America Vote Act. And what the Secretary of State did was she looked at the various types of voting machine possibilities, and she came up with the optical scan tabular machine. The reason why we're doing this is there's a mandate for a paper trail and an audit on the audit of the voting. So what we're going to do is just go over briefly what's going to transpire. Again, the election is 2 weeks from today, November 6th. Polling places are the same as normal. Mary L. Tracy School is District 1. High Plains Community Center is District 2. For those who are going to be out of town, they can vote by absentee. They can come into the town clerk's office and vote by absentee now up until the day before the election, or they can call and get an application for an absentee ballot. Even though we're going forward 2 steps, we seem to be taking a step backward in that we're going from the old lever machine where you used to go up to the machine, close the curtain behind you, and knock down the levers for whoever you wanted to vote for. What you're going to do now is you're going to go to the polling place, you'll be checked in, you'll show your identification, the acceptable forms of identification, and your name will be crossed off. You're then going to go to a ballot clerk who's going to hand you a paper ballot. And what I've done is I've given you a copy of what the ballot actually looks like. What's unique is that it's a double-sided ballot. So you're going to vote for the folks in columns 1 through 15 on page 1 and columns 16 through 24 on page 2. Once you're given a paper ballot, you're then going to proceed to a privacy booth. And I brought one of the privacy booths down, and that's where you'll fill in the ballot. Whoever you want to vote for, there's an oval above their name. You fill in that oval completely. You'll be given a pen and just fill in that oval completely. So completely close up the oval. Once you've decided who you're going to vote for, you then proceed to the optical scan voting machine. And what I've done is I've brought the bottom portion of the optical scan voting machine. This is actually where the ballots are kept. You'll place your ballot into a folder, walk over to the ballot and the optical scan machine, and then place your ballot into the scanner, which will then read the ballot. You can vote this way, this way, this way, this way. It'll accept it any which way. The ballot then goes into the ballot box, and it's kept there, and it's kept secure for actually 22 months by federal law. If there's ever need for a recount, if there's ever an audit required, which is part of the new law, which is governing us this year, we may be audited, I don't know. We have the actual paper ballots to do that audit. So if there is a recount, we can recreate the election. So what we're suggesting you do is when you go to the polling place, there's going to be a sample ballot right as you're walking in the door. And I've got one right here on the wall. It's going to be green in nature. It also shows you, and I'm going to give you an example. Let's look at the second page. We'll look at columns 16 through 24. Columns 16 through 19 are the constables. There it says you can vote for any 4 constables. So you can fill in 1 circle or 1 oval, you could fill in 2 ovals, you could fill in 3 ovals, you could fill in 4 ovals. The Amity Board of Education are columns 20 through 23. So on multiple offices, you can vote for up to the number of votes that it says you can vote for, up to 4. And you'll see in column 4, we have to fill a vacancy on the Amity Board of Education. And in that case, it's just a single office, so you can just vote for one of the 2 people running. You'll see row 3, or the 3rd row, it says write-in votes. At this point, there are no write-in candidates. In order to be a write-in candidate, you have to request to be a write-in candidate. You have to file that with the Secretary of State's office. The Secretary of State's office then notifies the town clerk that there is a write-in ballot or write-in person. So at this point, there are no write-in candidates. We also just suggest that take your time. If you run into a problem, there are going to be people at the polling place to help you if you need any questions answered. There'll be demonstrators there. There'll be people at the ballot clerk's area, and there'll be people around the privacy booths, just in case you need to answer a question. If you make a mistake, you can request an additional ballot. What we'll do is, at the polling place, the moderator will determine that you want a new ballot, and the old ballot will be spoiled. It'll be sealed up in an envelope, and you'll be issued a new ballot. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions on this item or anything else, be glad to answer.
Patrick, question, presumably these bubbles that we fill in can be done with a pencil or pen, it doesn't matter?
It's actually with a blue pen, a black pen, which will be provided, or a number 2 pencil, but we're going to provide pens in the privacy booths.
Great. In the privacy booths, are there, do you think, sufficient quantity, or do you think there might be longer lines this year because of the need to, become familiar?
Good question. If you think about the way we used to vote, when you walked into either Mariel or High Plains, you walked in, got checked in, and then you waited for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the lever machines. In this case, each polling place are going to have up to 20 privacy booths, so that there'll be plenty of areas for you to fill out the ballot. There's actually only going to be 1 scanning machine at each polling place, but when you walk up to the machine, it's just going to like instantly suck it into the
It kind of looks like a fax machine.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Commissioners, any other questions? Thoughts? Patrick?
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for coming over.
Okay.
Would you like these ballots back? The samples?
Yes, please.
Let's turn those back in.
And I'll get all my stuff out of your way.
Thank you, no hurry. Thanks again. Thank you, everyone. The second item on tonight's agenda is the consideration of the October 9th, 2007 minutes. If anyone has any changes, recommendations, thoughts, or comments, please let me know. Diana?
I arrived late I wasn't here for the minutes,
Okay,
and I'm not sure it says when I got here.
it does.
Now, let's see.
Set new application is right under the last line.
Okay. So there were, I'm just
Are you
thinking,
counting
I'm counting, yes.
how many people were there and voted?
5. And it says, wait, we got Gunning, Ross, Giovanelli, Disputa, and Robichaud, but I wasn't here for the minutes. That's 5,
Gunning,
right?
Ross,
Am I
Giovanelli,
looking at that
Booth,
right?
Studi- Yep. Did you abstain?
I wasn't here.
In here, I abstained.
You abstained, so it has to be 3 and 0 and 1. Yeah, it has to be 3, 0, and 1 on the vote.
Drew was here,
Yep.
Drew was here, and Rick
Instead of
was
4,
here.
0, and 1, let's change.
Rick was here. You could have voted.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's what it is. You missed the chairman, or the vice chairman that evening. There you go. So it is 4, 0, and 1. Thank you for the clarification. Any other comments or thoughts? Hearing none, may I get a motion to approve the minutes as written? Michael?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second? Second by Leslie. Thank you very much. All those in favor of the minutes as approved, please say aye. Any voting against? 2 abstain. Jim and I abstain. So does Bill. 3 abstentions. Routine business. There's some correspondence. The first item on the correspondence actually goes to the town clerk, Pat O'Sullivan, who we just had here. It's regarding our meeting schedule for next year, for beginning January 8th, 2008 through the following year, January 13th, 2009. You can see we meet twice a month on Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. here in the lower level of the town hall. And right now we are proposed to cancel the meeting for December 23rd, 2008. If anybody has any thoughts or concerns about that, please let the staff know. Thank you. Pardon me? Oh, we need a motion to approve these. Thank you, Katie. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the proposed meeting schedule and a second?
Motion to approve,
Leslie,
motion to approve the proposed schedule.
is her mic not working?
Not working.
Oh, there you go. Just leave it alone. Now you're on.
Motion to approve the schedule for 2008.
Thank you. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Drew. Looked right at you. We have a motion and a motion, second the motion to approve these 2008 schedule. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any against or abstain? Unanimous. Thank you. Couple other items. The soil and water brochure, pamphlet, flyer, I guess they call it a newsletter from the Southwest Conservation District arrived for fall 2007. We'll keep that on file here at the town hall if anyone likes to see it. It's often some very useful information in it. Similarly, the journal from the Connecticut College of Agricultural and Natural Resources of Yukon arrived. It's about a 6-page newspaper that talks a lot about the environment. And something that I haven't seen before, it's called Small Flows Magazine. It's helping America's small communities meet their watershed or wastewater needs, fall, winter 2007, and it's put out by the West Virginia University. I'm not familiar with it, but it's on file here if anyone would like to see it. I might want to thumb through that later. Any other correspondence?
We just wanted to broaden your horizon.
Broaden our horizons, push the mail through. Thank you. For new applications, the fourth item on the agenda, there are 2 brand new ones. They look like they have been delivered in manila envelopes to everyone. They are for receipt, 407 Old Tavern Road and 411 Old Tavern Road. And in parentheses after each of those addresses, it says new construction.
End of story.
End of story. No discussion on those tonight. They will be on the agenda at our next meeting, November 13th. For discussion tonight, 368 Dogwood Road. It's a septic repair. To the extent that we can do this in 15 minutes, that's fine. If not, we will have to take a recess and adjourn to a public hearing that's opened at 8 o'clock. Yes, sir. Please come up, state your name for the record.
Good evening, my name is Frank Polimas. I'm the homeowner at 368 Dogwood Road. Shall I put the...
If you
print up?
can, if it'll clip up there, fine.
Well, I'm before you this evening in regards to an application on a septic repair. My residence is in need of a septic repair at 368 Dogwood Road. We went, the town sanitarian and my engineers went back and forth since February, and we came up with the schema, the blueprint in front of you. The problem is that due to the wetlands around the location, I believe there's parts where the septic design will encroach on within that 50 feet parameter. You're supposed to be away from the wetlands, hence the application set forth for you this evening.
Scott, have you been to the site? And any thoughts on it?
I've been by this site. There is another septic repair in the neighborhood going on. Well, I think Fred Schumacher's comments pretty much, and the soil testing pretty much kind of say it all. Schumacher's comments, that the septic design was approved on July 20th, 07. Usable area for the septic system is maxed out. No other place to expand unless existing wetland area were to be filled. And I found that to be an interesting comment because, quite frankly, this septic system, according to the soils reports that were done in February of this year, the wetland was filled in order to put the septic system in to begin with. So as far as the 25-foot separating distance goes, this thing has actually been sitting in, and I'm surprised it's lasted this long, to be honest with you. The house was built in when?
Around I believe 1950.
The soils report, which I have, if anybody wants to look at it, the water table in one test pit, which is on DTC on your map, 37 or 7 inches was the actual depth to modeling prior to the wetland being filled. Just to give you an idea of how much this thing has been in groundwater all these years. Deep test pit A, 9 inches actual groundwater prior to it being filled, and 11 inches on DTB.
Does it look like you have to reroute your main water line there? Is that what's happening?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be rerouted around the driveway
Yeah.
and back up.
So what can you do? Commissioners, thoughts or questions? Does the lot continue way back here as well? Is that your property back here?
Yes, sir, I believe so. I believe it goes...
What's back there? That's all wet back there, okay. I don't see an alternative. So,
No, and at first I was, we do have in our regulations that the separating distance can be altered by the commission, provided that the applicant provides a geohydraulic testing, et cetera, to reduce that separating distance to prove that the effluent will be renovated before it gets to the wetland. And again, in this particular instance, we have enough documentation from the sanitarians soils report, again, that this thing has been in groundwater since day one, and in the wetlands since day one. They just filled it in at the time, quite frankly, by as much as over close to 30 inches in some areas to be able to put the septic system in back when the house was...
over 50 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, had to set the system down below that. So it really is, there is no other option here, based on all the research that I've done. That's all I can say.
Commissioners, any thoughts? Looking at the elevations or water flow on the surface, anything there?
There is a report that I think Mr. Polimas has dating back for the last 9 years. I'm not sure if you brought that with you.
Okay, yeah, I own the property for the past 9 years, and every time Sanitro comes out to pump it, basically I get a failing system on the report. Unfortunately, I didn't bring any of that documentation, but I know I do have it still, if needed.
So what that generally means is when they pump the tank out, the water from the fields comes back into the tank.
Fills it back up.
Fills it right back up again. So, which further proved out to me that this thing is already in groundwater in a wetland. And it's not, it's actually, according to the engineer, it should help the situation by what they're proposing to do with using the wick system again to try to pull the water in a different direction. That'd be your cross-section BB, and I think AA also.
Ladies, gentlemen, any thoughts? Diana?
It really looks like there's no other alternative. It's gotta be better than what's there.
I was hoping that it would say something to that effect. Because otherwise you deem the property unusable or something, and that's not a very good alternative. Frank, if you'll just bear with us for a moment while these commissioners ponder and perhaps make a motion. Commissioners, would someone like to make a motion regarding this proposal? Mr. Ewing?
I make a motion that we approve it as designed.
Thank you. May I get a second regarding that?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Bill. Jim, I'm passing down your way are the list of conditions. If you'll just bear with this, it will be listed by number. It'll be explained to you what they are in correspondence as well.
Thank you.
Item 1, 2, 3. 4 is per approval of the commission, I would gather. Footprint of the house, including decks and patios, will not encroach on the wetland area, but we're going to forego that, I guess. Number 5.
Jay, I think you might want to skip 5 and just go right to 8, because it'll accomplish both
Okay.
tasks.
8.
And 10.
10, you're done.
10. Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, 8, and 10.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we have a second for that motion? It was Bill? Thank you. With those conditions, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve this application, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Abstain? Passes unanimously. Good luck with your house. Good luck. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We have about 4 minutes before we can start the public hearing. We can go into old business if anybody has any. Anybody have any old business? Item number 5 on the agenda? No?
We can skip to the enforcement officer's report if you want to go out of order. If somebody will make a motion to do that.
But we can go right to the enforcement officer report is posted before, so you'd have 4 minutes. Are you prepared?
I am prepared.
Go for it. Wright's Pond, what's up?
Wright's Pond was proposed to be filled with some boulders this week along the dry edge of the embankment, and for some reason the boulder, even though there was an actual purchase order put together by our first selectman to do the work, for some reason the boulders didn't show up. And I don't think they're going to show up this week, so there's really nothing more to tell you other than that. But that is the plan, is to put some large boulders in the area where the benches used to be, which is now dry, before the wet rainy season comes in. Park them right on the dry land, and then put some what's called the tailings, or smaller stone in between, pack it in, put some topsoil on it, and seed it.
The boulders were going to be, what, 2-3 feet high, Jersey barrier height to prevent cars from moving forward?
No, the boulders were to reestablish an area to actually use the space between the parking lot and the water.
Okay,
'Cause I don't know if any of you have noticed, but the benches have been gone for
yeah.
quite some time because you had to stand in the water when it was there to get to the benches.
Hmm.
I mean, the embankment has eroded.
Just
so
eroded.
badly.
Yeah.
And the other proposal is to, I think, get rid of the stop blocks that are there because they have aided in the erosion situation. Or at least put them closer together so the water can't create tunnels around them.
But the boulders aren't going to be tall enough to sort of give a wall between the parking lot and the water?
They're not for that purpose.
Not that, okay. I
They're to
thought they
hold- They're
were.
to hold dirt in from going into the pond.
Yeah, okay. Questions, comments? No? We have about 2 minutes. We can just recess until 8 o'clock, and then we'll get back to the public hearing on Farm River Estates. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. This is the October 23rd Inland Wetlands Commission's in a public hearing tonight on Farm River Estates. Mr. Codispoti, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joseph Codispoti. I'm the founder of Codispoti and Associates. We're engineers, site planners, landscape architects, and land surveyors. And our address is 504 Boston Post Road here in Orange. The subject property, we'll discuss the existing conditions first. As you know, this was the Ewan Farm that had 66 acres. On my right, I will show you the entire farm. It's on a 24 by 36 sheet, unless there could be a better way to display this. Is this all right where it is?
Fine.
Okay. This was the entire farm, as is shown here, 66 acres that I'm doing with the pointer. And what this property line that you see here, this property line, which was conveyed, everything in this area is all open space now, and about 43.7 acres were sold off and are now owned by the town of Orange and have been designated as open space. So you get the feeling of where this fits into the entire farm. Through here, the entire Indian River corridor is now owned by the town. I'd like to just explain a little bit to you about the coloring on this map so we can understand it more clearly. All of the lime green, which is this color here, we'll call that lime green, which is also shown dotted. That area are wetland areas that are on the site. And on our site in here, there's about 5.7 acres of wetlands. What is shown in dark green are the wooded areas. And what is shown in very light green, this color here, were actually meadows or were farmed, areas that were farmed. And of course, were farmed rather recently. So you'll see these areas here, of course, were farmed and are now more or less open meadows with very little growth and almost no trees. What we propose is over here now on the left, and what you can see is our proposal is for 9 lots. In reality, there's a 10th lot that will be in this area here, It is now being tested. We haven't brought it in because it was subject to higher groundwater, and we needed to do some things to satisfy Mr. Schumacher. But Lot 10, of course, we will have to come back to you once that is approved by Mr. Schumacher for septic system. So there are 9 lots that are shown. What is happening, St. John's Drive is being extended southerly, and then Farm River Road goes to the east and then up to the north off of that. We're going to discuss some detail. We'll tell you a little bit more about the site. Through the site there are several ridges. There's a ridge here, there's one here, and as a result the water goes into these wetland areas and of course passes through the property on its way to the Indian River. Mr. Weiwei, our engineer, will discuss the drainage with you. Our proposal is very simple. This area that you see in red is the area that is going to be filled or proposed to be filled in order to permit Farm River Road to pass and to be able to utilize this about 7 acres of upland soils that are here. I just wanted to ask Mr. Weiwei, what was the area of the filled area? What was the... Yes, okay. 0.07, not 7/10. Less than 1/10 of an acre is scheduled to be filled. 0.07 is what you see in red. Now, when we look at this, is there an alternative? Is there some way we could have designed or planned this so as not to require this wetland crossing? Well, let me pass this out, please. If you could do that, Scott, it'd be greatly appreciated. If those could be passed out to members, I believe there's enough. If not, maybe one could be shared. Essentially, if you take a quick look at that, that is a locust plan. It's not what you see in red was a road that when the Olson subdivision came before you, that road that's shown in red on this particular plan was proposed at the time, or in that vicinity. It was possible to have a second road extending to this property. But when it came before this wetland commission, you decided in your wisdom, knowing the facts, that that would be more damaging than making this crossing that we propose here. Mr. Gordon from our office came before this commission and explained that if that road in red is not approved, it would require a wetland crossing. There would be no other way for us to enter into this 7-acre area. We know that we came through here. The other road would have come through here, and as a result, there would be no need of a crossing. It could have been a dead-end road that would have been dead-ended on this end, and this crossing could have been avoided. But in your wisdom, and knowing what the impacts were, you decided that that road that's shown on there in red would be more of an impact to the wetland soils in that area. I'm not familiar with them, and you told them not to construct that road. That road was asked not to be placed on the map, not to be built, and as a result, the only way in to this property is, of course, to come across what is now St. John's Drive, and then cross the wetlands. Now, we've chosen this area, which is the smallest area. It's the narrowest part. As you see the wetlands come through here, this narrowest part of the wetlands, as it widens out in this area, we've chosen the narrowest part to cross. And Mr. Weiwei will go through some of the details as far as with this crossing, its size, how it's going to be constructed, etc. in just a moment. The plan that you see, I'll give you an overall view of it. We just want to mention that there are, on this drawing, there's the 100-year flood line. It's right here, and that 100-year flood line is in that area. And then on lots 3 and 4, the 100-year flood line is shown here, which is mostly off in the rear of the property. This area in here, as it goes toward the river, is the 100-year flood line. So none of the construction will be in that flood zone or that flood area. Now, as far as the
It's a concrete.
other alternative of to crossing this wetlands with 0.7 acres of fill, the only alternative would be not to permit this and don't build on this area. This would be a no build. And we believe that's neither prudent nor feasible, because we do have to take into consideration the Inland Wetlands Act, ask each board to take into consideration the economic impact, and leaving all of this land undeveloped would be unacceptable. So the crossing is placed in the right place. The only alternative was removed in the past, and now the alternative as to how that crossing is designed would be important. And if you have questions now, I'd be happy to entertain them, but we're going to have you listen to the remainder of the presentation, if you would, by Mr. Weiwei. We also have Mr. Abrams here tonight, who is the wetland scientist and the expert on impacts. He's here to answer questions. If you have questions of me, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'd like to introduce Mr. Weiwei.
Diana, please.
I just want to clarify something. When we received the application for the Olson property, that was a complete application. It had all the information we needed to determine the impacts to the wetlands on that property. That's what we made our decision on. We did not have a complete application for this property, and we did not determine what kind of wetland impacts this crossing would have. We made the decision on that one. So that's not... What decisions we made on that really doesn't pertain to this, because we didn't have this at the time, this application.
I would like to clarify one point.
Yeah, I would comment too. I was going to say something, is that we did not tell Mr. Olson not to build that road. He proposed an application without that road to us, which we approved. So that's a little clarification. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just simply make the point, though, that our office did mention why that road would have been essential for the development of this property. And we know you didn't have the facts
Yeah.
about it, but I think everybody on the board understood by not permitting that would cause this area to be developed to be cut off. And we are sure that you made the right decision. We're not arguing with your decision, or you had all the facts, we did not. But that's what necessitated the need for this crossing.
Diana?
Maybe I missed it, but did you consider a bridge in this area for this crossing? And if you did, why did you not propose a bridge?
Okay, we'll let Mr. Weiwei address.
Right now, just to get in, if I recall correctly, it's a 36-inch pipe.
No, it's not.
No.
He'll explain.
Okay,
it to you.
please, go on.
Okay.
I know, I read 36-inch pipe. Let's see where that was.
What it was is that hydraulically, he would need no more than a 12-inch pipe. He could put in a 36-inch pipe, but he put in wildlife crossings.
Ah, yes. That was an alternative. These are
They're all the same.
the same.
You just-
Take a couple off.
Those are basically all the same, and what those are just copies of what Mr. Codispoti went over up on the board here. The color copies, I think, were at the request of Ms. Diana Ross at the last hearing.
Robert, your name, please.
So with that, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Robert Weiwei. I'm a professional engineer and principal with the firm of Codispoti and Associates. Mr. Codispoti has given you a fairly detailed background history of the site, and what I'd like to do is just pick up the presentation as it pertains to the engineering issues and the crux of the inland wetlands application before this commission tonight. As was previously noted, the wetland crossing that we're proposing for Farm River Road consists of approximately 0.07 acres of filling in conjunction with the development of the roadway system. The wetland crossing contains an inland watercourse and fringe wetland system within the immediate area. The crossing location has a tributary upstream watershed area of approximately 15 acres which encompasses lots 8 and 9 from our development, as well as additional off-site property from the Olson subdivision, which this commission recently approved. What's additionally notable is that within this intermittent watercourse, which primarily functions as a drainage conveyance system of the wetland system off-site, and then carrying it down to the Indian River to the south, is that there are also several farm crossings which presently exist out on the site right now. So it's basically similar to what we're proposing here, that the farm crossings that are out there, in essence, are providing access to that northeast corner of the site for utilization of the upstream area. Now, what we're proposing for this particular crossing is a 5-foot-high by 8-foot-wide concrete box culvert. That will be a solid, continuous rectangle, and it's basically being provided for hydraulic and environmental connectivity for the wetland system to the south and to the north. Now, when you take a look at the 5-foot-high structure, it's not going to have a 5-foot-high opening all the way through. What we're proposing to do is to basically fill the bottom 18 inches of the box culvert with substrate material that would be excavated and stockpiled from the wetland crossing area, and then utilized within the box culvert to help maintain that characteristic of the existing water course, and to help provide for the continuity and migration of habitat through that corridor area. And it's our hope and intent that that culvert crossing will continue to basically provide the same functionality of what's taking place out there right now within both the wetland system and the intermittent watercourse area. Now, an interesting point to note is that the culvert that we're proposing is substantially oversized. When we were first doing the engineering and design calculations for the subdivision, we took a look at the upstream watershed area and what was coming down to it, and did some calculations on what the flow rates would be to this particular point or the roadway crossing. And what we came across in our analysis is that for a 100-year storm, which under the subdivision regs, we wouldn't even have to provide the pipe crossing to that standard. But if we take the 100-year event, all that we would need for this particular crossing would be a 36-inch culvert. And that would basically maintain a headwater elevation less than the top of the pipe for that 100-year event. So what you can see is that from going from the 36 to the 5x8, we've provided substantially more cross-sectional flow area than what would really be needed from a purely hydraulic or hydrological point of view on that. Now, with the exception of this particular roadway crossing, there are no other proposed filling of wetlands for any of the 9 lots that are being proposed with this particular subdivision application. Now, with the 9 to 10 lots that this site can potentially yield, there's approximately 1,500 lineal feet of new roadway that will be constructed. As Mr. Codispoti pointed out, it will be the extension of St. John's Drive and Farm River Road within that area. And then when we account for the impervious surface area for both the roofs and the driveways, it would be conceivable that this development would have the potential for increasing the peak rates of runoff from the site. And as such, we've developed what I feel is a fairly comprehensive storm water management plan to address these issues, as well as water quality issues for the subdivision. Most notable is that we have a detention basin that will be located on Lot 3, shown in this general area down here. The basin will receive flow from all the roadway system from St. John's Drive, and what's worth noting is that there's a high point literally right at the property line, so anything off-site flows back in a northerly direction up towards the detention basin, which I believe is on Lot 5 for Whitney Acres. The remainder of St. John's Drive will all flow and be tributary to the detention basin, as well as Farm River Road. All the drainage from here will come down in this direction and ultimately flow towards towards the detention basin, and as well as any of the overland flow that would be tributary to the roadway system. And the watershed areas have been highlighted within the drainage study, which I believe has been made part of the record for this particular application. Just to give you some specifics on the detention basin, the total area that's coming into it is approximately 4.6 acres. The basin will have a total maximum storage capacity of approximately 1.6 acre feet with a maximum depth of 5 feet, and that occurs right in the vicinity of the outlet control structure. about the midpoint
Robert,
of
if I
the basin.
interrupt, 1.6 acre feet, is that something like 200 or 300,000 gallons of water?
I'd have to get the calculator out.
But isn't it in that magnitude?
Yeah,
More than that,
it's gonna be-
actually.
It's, well, 1 acre foot, just for the sake of argument, 1 acre foot would be 43,560 cubic feet. So if you go 1.5 times that,
Yeah.
you're looking at probably about 60,000 cubic feet.
Thank you.
Okay, and with the basin being 5 feet deep, the main method that we're going to use to mitigate the flow out of this, or basically slow the flow rates down coming out of the basin, is via an outlet control structure. And that control structure is found on the detail sheets, and what you'll notice is that there's a very small opening at the bottom of the control structure that will allow for the throttling back of peak discharge rates outside of the basin. In addition to that, to help with the water quality issues, the detention basin is proposed to have a low-flow channel, which is shown on this particular drawing here, to kind of meander throughout the basin. I believe more detailed information is available on the drawings, I believe, on sheet SP 6 and 7 of your application package. Now, prior to reaching the detention basin, all of the roadway drainage, basically, as I said before, is going to be conveyed through an underground system via pipes and catch basins, getting down to a point right near the cul-de-sac here where it flows into the last structure. That is proposed to be a water quality structure, and what we propose in that area is a storm scepter water quality model. The primary function of this structure will be to contain any particulates and floatables that may be contained within the stormwater and the runoff from the roadway system getting down into that area. The unit's been sized in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendation to meet the water quality objective of 80% total suspended solids removal. In addition, for water quality enhancements, we are also proposing that each lot be provided with infiltration galleries to accommodate the first inch of runoff from the tributary roof areas to help promote groundwater recharge, as well as water quality enhancements with that. Now, when the detention basin, storage, the water quality structures, and infiltration galleries have all been considered, it's our opinion that the site will be capable of meeting the 80% total suspended solids removal as prescribed by the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection. As a result of this, it's our opinion that the stormwater management plan will not create any adverse conditions downstream or upstream of the proposed project. Now, in addition to the stormwater management plan, we've also provided a fairly detailed soil erosion sediment control plan, and that's part of your package. And basically, we've provided some of the typical details that would be encountered, mud tracking pads for the roadway entrance coming up onto St. John's Drive, as well as mud tracking pads for each of the proposed driveways within the development area. We've identified stockpile areas for for topsoil within the immediate area. Silt fencing has been provided, as well as permanent vegetation within the area. Now, I also believe Diana had asked for a colored map of the S&E plan that just kind of highlighted the silt fence areas on that. And just like to put that one into the record. If you need more copies of that, we could certainly produce them. But what that map is basically just a copy of the soil erosion sediment control plan with the silt fencing colored up in red to make it easier to depict.
Diane is pointing out, I think I asked for it. I was finding it hard to see, but
Okay, and I believe that there were,
you can have this for the record. Do you want to see it, Bill?
I believe that there were several letters that were submitted from various department heads with respect to this application. The first one being from Mr. Fred Schumacher in a memo dated August 23rd of 2007. And in that, he basically had 3 points, and I guess if the commission doesn't mind, I'll just read them into the record. It may be easier for it. The first one deals with a footing drain on Lot 2 should not discharge 8 feet from the property line, which may cause a possible drainage nuisance on adjoining property. Footing drain should discharge into the catch basin in front of Lot 2, or footing drain pipe should be relocated. So the area that we're looking at is this area right here. Presently, we're showing the footing drain discharging in this general area here. Now, what he's making reference to is that we shouldn't be this close to the property line, and with the recommendation of possibly tying into this catch basin here. Now, we certainly have the opportunity to make the connection into the catch basin here via the grades that we presently have proposed. However, it was our opinion that when we were going through the design process on this, that in part, what we wanted to do, because typically the water that's going to be coming out of the footing drain, if there is any, is basically a groundwater condition. So rather than discharge that back into the stormwater conveyance system, to us it seemed to make more sense to try to get that water back into the wetland system, which it would have originally fed to anyway. With regards to the point of creating a drainage nuisance on an adjacent property, the adjacent property in this case is not residential, so to speak. It's not developed. This is all part of the town open space, which was conveyed off the original 66-acre parcel. I suppose that if the commission deems appropriate, we could probably pull this pipe back a little bit. But again, because of the elevations that we're looking at with respect to the basement floor elevation, we're kind of limited in how far back we would be able, and how far back from the property line we would be able to do that. So I think with respect to that comment, we could address whichever way the commission feels is best to go with that, but I think, again, our opinion is the way that we have it shown on the plan makes the most sense and is probably the most beneficial to the wetland area. The second comment reads as follows: an existing dirt road not shown on sheet SP2 between lots 1 and 2 bisects an isolated wetland area on lot 1. I have observed a pipe under the dirt road which permitted a connection and drainage between the isolated wetland and larger wetland area on lot 2. Is the pipe still there? Will any effort be made to ensure drainage connection between the two wetland areas? What he's referring to is this area up in here, basically between these two wetland systems and the area that's shaded in lighter lime shading. This is where one of the existing farm roads is presently located, which comes in and kind of bisects these two wetland areas. I've been out to the site a number of times. I believe Mr. Allen has been out to the site a few times to try to take a look and see if that pipe existed, as Fred had pointed out within his letter. I haven't been able to find it, and I think Mr. Allen can also attest that it doesn't appear to be any pipe that's located within the roadway system. Now, what appears to typically happen in here is that this wetland system, again, is also connected off-site, and which would continue up onto Whitney Acres. But this area right in here typically gets trapped. There's a little low point in the middle. You can see by elevation it's approximately 160, 1.5. So this area would have a tendency of ponding to some small depth, and then once the elevation of this farm road is reached, it tends to breach that roadway system, or breach the farm road, where it would overflow the road and then connect up with the larger wetland system off to the west. So with regards to what's happening in here, again, what you can see on the drawing here is we don't have any activity proposed within close proximity of this wetland system. So we're not proposing to do any changes within the wetland area or within the immediate vicinity of this particular wetland area here. So if there were a pipe to be there, it's our intention to have it remain if it is there. If there isn't a pipe there, then so be it. I think with what happens with the ponding depths in here, it's part of the characteristics and part of the function of what's been occurring there over many years. And personally, I don't see much of a reason or need to change what's presently happening up in this area here. Again, if the commission feels strongly one way or the other, we could certainly make provisions within the plans to accommodate that. And his third point, or his third comment, was that the wetland areas on lots 1 and 2 form the headwaters for a stream which flows south across adjacent property, not part of the proposed subdivision, and onto lot 3. To ensure continuity and future maintenance of the stream, I recommend that the westerly property line of lot 3 be repositioned so that the wetland area and stream is eliminated as part of lot 3. Otherwise, the aforementioned portion should be included with an easement. What he's referring to is basically the western portion of the Lot 3 property line, and what you can see here is that the intermittent water course kind of picks up and it barely nips the property line here, and then comes down, and it's probably at this point 3 or 4 feet inside the property, and then kind of meanders, and then the stream kind of disappears and then gets re-picked up again off-site, where eventually it hooks up with the wetland system and flows down to the
Robert, could you just do me a favor? You're pointing out, I mean, we've got the colored maps here, and when we're looking at your colored map up there, it's just really hard to try to follow what you're saying on, so either use this map or maybe that map over there, just so we can sort of follow. It's just very, very difficult to see what you're pointing to right now.
Yeah, the two maps are different. Basically, this is just a blow-up dealing with our site, where this one tends to cover a lot of the off-site area. So again, if everybody's oriented the same way, the area that we're looking at is basically right in through here.
I don't believe that that's the area he's referring to. I think he's referring to, what is it, we're saying, the Farm River Road, where that intermittent water course in between that space, I believe, is what he's referring to, between the Farm River Road and the cul-de-sac of St. John's. There's I'll call it a jog in the boundary line there. When I believe what he's saying is that all of that should be in a straight line.
No, because I've had the conversation with Mr. Schumacher. The area that he's specifically talking about is right here. And what the issue, or what's at question, is that the intermittent stream starts right about here, travels in a southwesterly direction, bisects or intersects the property line at this location. Then you can see here, it's barely onto our property before exiting the site over here again and then hooking back up with the Indian River. What his comment is that can this property line, the most westerly property line on Lot 3, be relocated up into this area so that the intermittent water course is wholly contained within the Town of Orange open space?
Which is what I understood him to say. It came out differently.
Right,
Okay, very good. Thank
All right,
you.
so we're on the same page. So again, I think that's open for discussion. There's probably a couple different ways of that could be accommodated. Again, if the commission so or deems that it's appropriate. It could be handled via an easement, where an easement could be placed that would basically keep that intermittent water course within an easement area, and then that would give the town the rights to go in there and maintain that. The water course that's in here is basically an old farm ditch that was constructed at some time during the farming operations to convey stormwater runoff from the crop areas. And if you take a look at the topography and the contours within that area, what you'll realize is that this is an extremely flat area coming down in through here with very little pitch on the water course. So during times of when the property was under a farming operation, there would have been a greater tendency for silts and sediments from the farming operations to get down into this wetland system and to basically settle out within that intermittent water course because the velocities are so low on the stream channel flow. And hence, that would have required, periodic maintenance to make sure that the channel stayed open. I believe what's going to happen is that with the development of this site, with the farmland being taken off, and you're getting into a more stabilized surface cover, and whether that be via pavement or grass area for each of the lots, you're not going to have that tendency of having bare soil for a portion of the year as the crops are being either tilled or rotated in from season to season. So I think over time, this intermittent water course is going to have less of a tendency of silting up or becoming clogged up where it's going to require more maintenance. If anything, I think with the development of the site, maintenance is going to become less frequent. However, be that as it may, if there is a significant concern for that, then we could certainly explore either putting the easement over it, or I believe area-wise, and we'll have to check this and confirm it, that we do have room to move that lot line without impacting any of the lot area requirements or setback requirements for lot number 3. So I think with that, that wraps up the comments from Mr. Schumacher. The second letter that we have was from Mr. Lieberman, and his original letter, which was dated September 7th of 2007, had a number of items in there, and I believe that they're already part of your record. I don't think I want to go down each and every one of those unless the commission feels it's appropriate. I believe that you do have our response letter dated October 10th of 2007, and then Mr. Lieberman's counter response dated October 17th of 2007 with regards to that. So
We have, we did not get the counter response at all from Mr. Lieberman.
Yeah, just to set it straight, Robert, you said September 7th, 2007. I think it all began on September 5th, 2007? The memo from Mr. Lieberman?
yeah, the memo I have from Mr. Lieberman was dated 9/7/07.
Really? I'm looking at it September 5th.
Yeah, that's the one that,
Okay.
you may have received it on the 7th.
Yeah, we may have received it on the 7th.
All right.
That could just be a typo, but I'm sure it's the same letter.
I have your letter of
October 10th.
October 10th to
Right.
Mr. Lieberman. Apparently, you all had a office meeting on October 9th,
Correct, yeah.
and then there is a paragraph saying that he called you, whatever yesterday was, and still has an issue with the 100-year floodplain. Is that what you mean by the response?
Right. Yep. So basically, all of his comments, all of his September 5th, 07 comments have been addressed, with the exception of item 1, paragraph 2. And I think what I'd like to do, because again, I haven't had an opportunity to meet with him and go over it, but apparently he didn't understand what we conveyed at that meeting, and I guess when he read the language within our response, he wasn't comfortable with it. Basically, what is at issue is with regards to how the floodplain lines have been shown on the drawings. Now, what we have is there are 2 separate floodplain zones located within the property. And what I'll do is make reference to the first one, which is a Zone X, as shown on the current FEMA map. And now a Zone X is an area of a 500-year floodplain area, an area of a 100-year floodplain with average depths of less than 1 foot, or a drainage area with less than 1 square mile, or an area protected by a levee from a 100-year flood. I think we could rule that one out because there are no levees up in the area. So this flood zone X, which is shown up on lots 8 and 9, which is up in this area here, would fall into one of the other 3 categories. Which one it is, we don't know because it is not identified within the flood insurance study. Now, within this zone, in the flood insurance study, there are no elevations depicted within this flood zone. Okay, so what would typically happen is if we know what the flood elevations are, then we could actually depict those on the map. For this particular area here, since flood elevations have not been determined, The only way that we could show this flood zone on the map is to do an overlay of the FEMA flood maps, which is what we've done in this area. So we've taken our site and overlaid it on top of the FEMA flood maps and plopped that line down to the best of our ability to show what that area is. And with the way that we've done this particular flood zone outline on lots 7, 8, and 9, he has no issues with. What still seems to be a little bit of a question in his mind is how the floodplain line was depicted on lots 3, 4, 5, and up and through this area here. Now, within the floodplain area on those particular lots, there is a flood insurance study in which detailed computer calculations have been done. Elevations have been determined for the 100-year at various stages along the river area. And basically that is how those lines got put over onto the FEMA or onto the firm maps at that point. But we did not take the FEMA flood map in this case and just overlay it on top of the site drawing, because we have more accurate data to work with, which is contained within the firm, which is contained within the firm or the flood insurance study. So based upon the flood profile information, the cross-section information that's available within that study, we were actually able to pick off what the flood elevations are at particular cross-sections coming throughout the site. Now, when we combine that with the topography that we have with the site, in addition to our field verification of the surveying information that we've done out on the site since we've done the development, that is how this line basically came into creation on this particular drawing. So if you were to take a look at the actual FEMA map and compare it to this, you would probably notice some subtle differences, because again, the topography that we have here is much more detailed than what they typically work with on the flood insurance studies. Where we have detailed 2-foot contours, typically the flood insurance studies work off of either 5 or 10-foot contours. So you do tend to get some variations that would happen within that area there. And if we were to take and do a straight overlay on top of this and just take the FEMA map, what you may find is that if you have, and I'll just use this as an example, if you have a flood elevation at 145, you may find that if we just overlay this 145 may kick way up into here, actually up on top of the 150 or 152 contour. Well, common sense would tell you that if the 100-year flood elevation in that area is at elevation 145, it doesn't matter how I show the line up here, that there's no way that the water can get up to 152. It's not going to climb up that contour line at that particular point. So in essence, we've taken all the incremental flood elevations that step up the Indian River as we go, and those lines have been graphically shown on the drawings here to coincide with what the actual flood elevations are that are contained within that study area. So what you'll notice in the way that the flood profile line is shown in here, for the most part, it does not cross any contour lines, and in fact runs parallel to them. You will have some areas where it does cross, for the simple reason that as we go from, say, contour elevation 144 to 145, obviously it has to step in those locations, but it's a gradual tendency, so that at the lower part you may be at elevation 144 here, by the time you get up to here you're 148. So there's a rise in water surface elevation of, let's say, 4 feet from the south end up to the north end. And that's basically the way that the flood elevation line was depicted on the drawings. And it's our opinion, and we'll have to sit down with Mr. Lieberman and just reemphasize this, is that that these drawings do meet his requirement, in that the floodplain line, as shown on the drawings, is based on a field survey. And that's our contention with regards to that issue.
Robert, may I just ask a different way of what you just stated? Are the contoured lines a result of a field survey?
Yes, they are.
That's all I think Mr. Lieberman wanted.
Okay.
That's the way I read it, and then I accept your argument. I don't know if anyone else does, but it makes sense to me. Because if it doesn't matter, as you said, if the floodplains depicted are at the wrong field survey lines, then those lines are wrong. In other words, if they were showing floodplain at 140s when you went out to field survey, marked it at 150, it can't be 140.
Right.
I don't know if anyone wants to jump in here. I think that's a very important point. I mean, why would we produce these maps, allow this application to go forward, such that 100 years from now, if someone else is trying to redevelop this property when we're long gone, only to find out that we put overlays on something that aren't true when his field survey says, here's what the elevations are. Robert?
Okay, I think with that, unless we need to go...
I think Scott's a little uncomfortable with that. He's fidgeting.
Gas pain.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, unless there are any other questions with regards to his other comments from the 9-5 letter, I think those have all been addressed, and they'll show up in subsequent drawings to the commission.
I think to what you alluded to, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Weiwei, is that your topos were field surveyed, or were they?
Well, the topos are based upon the town topographical information. Okay, that serves as the base. Then as part of our survey, and by the way, the topographical maps, that is a field survey, whether you realize it or not. There's photogrammetry involved. There's field survey to verify all the information that goes into those maps. So the topographical maps in of themselves do represent a field survey.
For topography only.
Right,
But
correct.
that's why they call it a topo map, but I think
Right.
what the point I'm trying to get at here, and I think where the confusion lies here, and I'm hoping I don't muddy the water, as opposed to, in the past, we have had applications where there is a flood line shown based on a FEMA map, and a firm will overlay that onto their map and say this is it, without any regard to what the actual topography of the site is. So when we ask people to go out and actually field locate that flood line and actually plot it on a map, sometimes we find that there are vast differences. In this particular instance, because these topos were done from the town topos and the spot shots that were taken out on site, and also just the overall topography being at 2-foot elevations, even if the floodplain maps or the firm map showed that the floodplain was at, let's say, for elevation 148 for something to talk about, you're still in a situation where you've got higher ground all the way around it based on field topo. So there's really no need to actually go out and physically stick a stake into that 100-year flood line as depicted on the firm map. And I believe that's where you're headed. This is what Bob is headed, and I think that's where the difference here is that Mr. Lieberman seems to think that we need to stick a stake in there all the way around for that 100-year floodplain. And in this particular instance, I just don't see where it's going to change anything. On other sites, absolutely, but in this particular case, for the lower lots, 4 and 5 in particular,
Yeah, and
I
I
don't
think
think it's going
just
to change.
I think just to follow up on that just a tad, Scott's absolutely right, because if you're looking at two different situations on this particular site where you have such great topographical relief, and if one were to take a look down on Lot 3, where from what we're showing the edge of the floodplain here to the house, you've got almost a 12-foot change in elevation. So for the sake of argument, even if the flood elevations were off 2 feet, okay, if we were to, say, raise the flood elevation by 2 feet, we're literally only shifting it 5 feet further to the west in this
Horizontally.
direction, or horizontally. Now, if you were to take a look at a situation, and I'll just use like Indian Lake as an example, where that's a very flat area, and you got the bowl, and there's a lot of wetland and swamp areas around there. You take that same 2-foot error in flood elevation and go out with that, a 2-foot change in vertical elevation can be hundreds of feet horizontally, because everything is so flat that's surrounding that floodplain area. And for this particular application, this particular site, you just don't have that situation. The topography, once you get outside this wetland system, is just very steep, like within those areas.
If I may, it says in the page 1 of the Farm River Estates Drainage Report dated July 2007, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth paragraph, it's on page 1. The topography of the site further confirms this with several north-south ridge lines which direct predominantly sheet flow runoff towards the adjacent wetland and property lines, and this is getting at the point Robert just had. Slopes within the portions of the property to be developed are generally less than 10%, with a few fringe areas adjacent to the wetlands being in the 10 to 20% range.
Right.
Thanks.